Small chance. So, but anyway, Deion Sanders and Pat Narduzzi are beefing right now. And Pat Narduzzi at the ACC meetings a week ago, talking about Deion's massive roster turnover, they said. That's not the way it's meant to be. That's not what the rule intended it to be. It was not to overhaul your roster. We'll see how it works out, but that, to me, looks bad on college football coaches across the country. The reflection is on one guy right now, but when you look at it overall, those kids that have moms and dads and brothers and sisters and goals in life, I don't know how many of those 70 that left really wanted to leave or they were kicked in the butt to get out. And then Deion said, about Pat Narduzzi, he's not mad at me. He's using me to shoot bullets at another coach who he has an issue with, which would be Lincoln Riley, because Lincoln Riley took Biletnikoff winner and eventual first-round draft pick Jordan Addison away from him, and so that's where he, his beef started. I don't know who he is. If he walked in here right now, I wouldn't know him. And that's true. That not every coach, nobody all knows each other, but it is an interesting thing. Look, I think if you take Deion's personality out of the issue of turning the whole roster over, which to have a rational discussion about it, I think you have to. Because Deion's personality is not going to change. Deion's about Deion, and everybody knows that. And you either like Deion or you
Deion's
don't.
About the Lord. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I kind of look at him, even though not to this degree. Look, Lance Armstrong did a lot of terrible things to people, but he also raised millions upon millions of dollars for cancer. So sometimes good things come out of bad. And Deion does things for people. He also does things for himself. So I think you have to, look at the yin and yang of every.
That's not really what the part is in question here. No, this has nothing to do with the story.
Anyway,
yeah.
But if you take his personality out of it, look, Deion took over a team that's a 1-11, a Power 5 team that was as bad as you can get and as irrelevant as you can get, that just 30 years ago, and even less time than that, but 30 years ago was winning national championships. 20 years ago was constantly contending for conference championships to now where they're not. They're not even close to that. So I can see, look, the rules say you can turn over the whole roster. So he went and he turned over pretty much the whole roster. That's what it is. I also see Pat Narduzzi's argument as like, yeah, that's a really harsh reality of things. But, Deion Sanders isn't beholden to any of those guys. The rules say he's not. So, yeah, while it sucks, there are harsh realities in this business. And I think that Pat Narduzzi wrestling with the ethics of it, that's fine. And if he doesn't want to do that, that's fine. But he wasn't put in that same position that Deion was. When he took over Pitt was not nearly as bad as Colorado is. So, the rules weren't in place for him to do that at the time when he took over that job. And two, he didn't really need to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't really want to crown either guy like a winner or a loser here in their little roundabout argument, and I don't even know if you'd even classify it really as an argument, but just throwing kind of shots back and forth. I think it's a little out of line what, Narduzzi said in terms of kind of pinning it on Deion. Now he says, that it's all focused on one guy right now, and then he obviously refers to the roster attrition and how many of those guys actually wanted to leave versus were kicked out, and obviously that's all directed at Deion as well. And the NIL not being used the way it's supposed to. Well, Pat, that's the case around the country, man. Like that's all over. That's not just Colorado. I mean, that's the case all over. And it's like a lot of things. Is it allowed? Yes. Then what's the problem? Like if you don't like the rule, that's fine. Then find a way to change it. I know that's what everybody's trying to do right now. But technically, what he's doing is not illegal. I mean, he's doing what he can to construct his roster legally and above the rules. And now I'm sure somebody will say there's no way like NIL money or tampering and all of that. Like I get that, but again, that's going on all across college football. So to act like Deion's the only one that's doing that, I think is unfair to single him out in that way. I think Deion kind of nailed it. And look, I'm not like everything Deion says is gospel by any means, but I do feel like he's right that Narduzzi's lashing out at the overall situation, but then kind of, throwing it at Deion specifically, and that's unfair and because he is not mad at just Deion. He's mad at the whole situation, just like most college football coaches are mad, or college basketball, or whoever involved in university athletics right now is mad at this situation. It was launched and it was somewhat abrupt, and certainly they hadn't figured out all of the rules or logistics or all of that. It was just kind of a blind launch a couple of years ago, and it's led to exactly what everybody predicted back then when it was launched the way that it was. We all knew that's not exactly what everybody thought it was going to look like. Under the table, worse than ever. Poaching rosters, worse than ever. Transfers galore, worse than ever. It's exactly what everybody predicted it would be, because it was not on a super solid foundation when it all began. And, a lot of that, too, is on schools, the NCAA, for just feeling like they never had to prepare themselves because it was just never going to happen. If we just close our eyes and wish hard enough, like we're just never going to have to worry about this. And then reality set in, and now they've been scrambling ever since like chickens with their heads cut off. So don't be mad at, Deion for using it the way it's allowed to be used right now, even if there may be a little thing or two here and there that's technically a tamper or whatnot. But that could, again, be a, you could point all over the country, including to Lincoln Riley, like Narduzzi did. Narduzzi, clearly, he's right. Like, he could have gone in more on Lincoln Riley than he did, a subliminal shot at Deion. So I'm not mad at Pat Narduzzi. I understand his frustrations. I do think that he probably focused a little bit too much on the Deion thing, or that's the way it could be perceived, versus Lincoln Riley, for example, who did take his player, his Biletnikoff award-winning star player last year. But this is just the frustration that's been boiling up, just leaking over into the public, and we hear it from time to time, whether it's an athletic director or a head coach. They all have their various quotables every week about the same type of deal, but it definitely gets a bit more attention because it's Deion he's referring to versus just vaguely saying NIL is a problem and there's poaching rosters. Okay, well, then you and 100 other coaches have said that. But the fact that he mentions Deion or points to Deion, and then Deion, of course, fires back, well, that's why it's a story on these websites. And it's more, I think, the turning over the roster thing to me, there's going to be some kids that aren't going to have their opportunities again. But Pitt does that too, though. Every school does that where – your career's kind of over, or at least you're at a point where you can't help the team anymore, and they tell you, like, look, hey, we're moving on from you. That's how it works. It is not the NFL roster shuffle that Deion did in Boulder, but again, he's available to do it, and it's going to be really hard for them to win more than 3 or 4 games this year with a roster full of guys who've never played together before, most of whom came after spring. And to Narduzzi's point, what he did with the roster is not what the intentions are. Yeah. I don't think anybody probably thought they should have, but I doubt anybody probably thought, and I don't know what they could have done really to prevent it anyways, but certainly you weren't hoping that you'd have the type of massive roster overhauls that you've seen like at Colorado. But, he's putting his fingerprints on the program and doing what he can within the rules as best we know. And, whether that was the intention or not, that's how he's using it. Now, guess what? If it blows up in his face and they suck for like a good 2 years and all the buzz dies off until he goes somewhere else, until he gets it to where it needs to be, then, maybe this is the one and only time we really see this kind of a massive overhaul, and it's sort of just a one-time thing. But if it's successful, then I got bad news for Pat Narduzzi. Watch how many new coaches come in and say, screw like the 15 changes we were going to make, to at least keep it like sort of medium level and not like some major outcry. We're going to go the Deion route and just tear them all up. Tear all you 12, you can say the other 70, like, good luck to you. And that's basically what he did. And I don't know how, like, I don't think there's been documented like how much changeover, like on a, I don't want to encourage more charts, actually. Never mind. I don't know how well you can compare the numbers that are out there for like Lincoln Riley's turnover at USC versus Deion's at Colorado versus so-and-so's at this place versus so-and-so's at this place. I know Deion's up there near the top because we haven't seen anything close to like the 60s or whatever it's in at this point. But yeah, it's a unique way to use it. He's getting a lot of flack for it. He's also getting some praise for it. And bottom line, Paul, is it will all matter when he hits the field this upcoming season and beyond that. That will be the big I told you or told you so or should have listened or what have you, because if they suck, he's going to have a mulligan year. But you're also going to have to show a little something, and this could very well end up as much in a disaster as it does in them competing for a Pac-12 crown. We'll have to see. He's either going to be a genius or somebody who should have probably done a little bit less. And, we'll all observe and have our takes on that when that time comes. But it's really hard to tell right now what's good or what's what. As in terms of the football success, but on paper, just the chaos of that roster turnover, yeah, I can see where that's concerning to coaches, but it's not Deion's fault. There's a lot of people with their hands in that jar.
No, and, when it comes to policing, tampering, and all that, I just don't know what you can do.
Well, they clearly can't.
I mean, you can't subpoena the kid's phone records. You can't follow him around everywhere he goes.
Right.
You can't look at this DMs on social media. You can't, there are so many ways to get in touch with people now that, you can't, that they don't have access to. And you can't, what law would it be against for a coach? You can't pass a law that says one coach can't call a kid. You can't do it. There's just nothing they can do. So they have to.
Well, there is, but they don't want to do it. Sign these guys up like
contract,
NFL player. That's the only way to do it. Tampering rules, no contact between this free agency period and this, end of the free agency period and the draft. Your recruiting classes are in this designated spot. They've got that loosely, obviously. There's a couple signing days, but in terms of if you want to get rid of all the non-certified agents / trainers / whoever, you want to get rid of the tampering and you want to do, the only real way to do that is to have some ironclad laws in place, and they're obviously attempting to do that to some extent. But yeah, I don't know beyond that how you could police it, and obviously that's why it's been a talking point for so long, is because nobody does. Nobody has a good answer outside of the answer that nobody really wants to hear. Save for those who do want to see mini NFL and contracts and CBAs and all those types of things. If that's not what you want and you want more of the college football that you knew, there's not an answer outside of it not being the same college football that you knew in a major, major way, which would be those types of contracts.
Well, and the other thing is once you do that, you also the student athletes right now have the transfer portal, which is wide open. Well, they'd have to give away some of that because then you can't just be.
There's dates,
yeah,
and then the graduates are more free. But yeah, that would have to be sharpened for sure.
They have to give away some of that, some of that freedom that they had and all that. But maybe it's better all the way around. It'd be easier to keep track of. But yeah, there's nothing that they can do about it. To your point, that they want to do about it.
Yeah, the way they'd like to be able to.
The way that they just can't, because again, all it takes is somebody going to a high school coach and saying.
It's so unique. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Just going to a high school coach and going, hey, I noticed that he's the third wide receiver on that depth chart. Would he want to come here and be the first one? Or I noticed that team is 7-5. We were 11-1 last year. Would he like to come here and help us go 12-0?
Or, hi, Mrs. So-and-so. I'm Coach so-and-so. Oh,
Yeah.
That's right. Your son at UTSA is interested in coming to Oregon? That's interesting. I don't know. Outside of having a draft, how do you police that, though, even still, the recruiting side of it?
Yeah.
That's the part that I don't understand is even with all these rules, these NIL rules and all that, how are you still doing that? Because you're not cutting off DMs. What policing is there going to be to make sure that that's all still on the up and up? Because this isn't the NFL draft where you just say, oh, it's our turn. We pick Joey Nelson from, Wichita Falls, Texas. You're still signing classes the way you're signing them. Now, how you get them to sign is different because of what you're luring them with, at least sort of different from what it's always been. But yeah, there's nothing to stop the tampering from my vantage point in any way, shape, or form, even with rules put in place, unless it was just if you get caught, you are banished to the nether realm of football coaching. But beyond that, I don't know. So that is what it is. I don't think either guy looks terrible in this. Narduzzi's fine. He's frustrated, just like a lot of other people. Just probably should have widened his criticism a little bit or kept it less specific. And Deion's defending what he's doing, and that's totally understandable as well. And who knows? That'll make a great bowl game maybe. If Colorado makes a bowl game, Pitt makes a bowl game, we'll see. But there's a little storyline for bowl officials in case either of those teams or both those teams get to 6 wins. Let's have Narduzzi versus Deion.
Yeah, Pitt has a better shot, I think, because their schedule is not as difficult.
Deion makes
as
a bowl in
Deion's
year one, then everybody's going to be like, whoa,
Ooh, yeah.
You think the hype's out of control right now, or the excitement's out of control right now? Let him have proof of concept, and then this thing will really go on to another level.
Yeah, with that